Good morning. We're going to start now in the next Sichah, part of the project of the Sichos. This is a Sichah which is in Chelik, weit in Chelik of Aleph, which is the Chelik we're learning this time. It's the third Sichah, the Parashat Beshalach, Chelik of Aleph, Beshalach Gimel. Besayf Parsha Seinu by Mechames Amalek stellt sich Rashi auf die Wörter wie dem that Moshe kvedim und es misfarish b'shvilshin es atze b'mitzvah mina acher tachtem nesiakru gadol. This is the war by the war of Amalek at the end of this week's Parsha. The Torah describes and it says that Moshe's arms were like very heavy, they were weary. And Rashi says, why was Moshe's hands kvedim? Because he was lax, shis atzel in this mitzvah, and he appointed another instead of him, so his arms became very weary. Now the Rebbe explains like this: the Pirush Preserver Pashtus is what's the straightforward explanation? Rashi is oisen to mazbezain as agam from the lashon lidei shekved and lashon haiva. Even though if you look at the wording, it says Moshe's hands were kvedim, not they were heavy, lashon haiva, something that's happening now. So this mashma thus is given by im demos a matzah tvinim mitzad zayin zikne. Zashim lefarish as thus is nitazeh. Nurse is demot yishen to the vasiba yishvilush and his atzah but it's a kum nisakri gover. Now, even though the wording Moshe's arms were weary implies that Moshe's arms were constantly very heavy, weary, as a result of his old age, so therefore Rashi says no, that Moshe's arms became weary for a reason because he was lax in the performance of a mitzvah. So that's why Hashem gave him a punishment that his arms also became very weary. So the Rebbe says like this: without oververstehen, we have to understand. In Parshas from Yosef and Pasuk by Yivaderach v'Malain, Yivakish Amisei Yisrash Mefarish v'Yivakish Amisei v'Meisha, v'Yishlem Molas Eliezer B'nei v'Alis Shnesrash v'Nenish Einish Misei. Tanyum l'Biesi Chas v'Shom l'Yisrash Allah Omar Kadosh Baruch Hu Tzivan Yichodet. Now in Parshas Shmais, Pasuk says when he was on his way at the end, so it says that the Nachash wanted to kill Moshe Rabbeinu. Rashi says, what does it mean he wanted to kill him? Moshe had not circumcised his son Eliezer. So since Moshe was like remiss, he was a little bit nisrashel, he was remiss on the commandment of circumcising his son Eliezer, he was punished by death. Now, a Brisa taught, the Basi said, Chas v'Shalom, Moshe was not remiss, rather Moshe had thought, Hashem has commanded me. Now, we bought the Rashi Zog nicht even Zweiten Pirush as das is at Rashi Kietz was in Mamash Fiddush Mikra. Since Rashi does not introduce the second explanation as a drash, and not the actual pshat of the pasuk, so it's verstandig as Eichel be Fiddush Mikra man nicht noch a Pirush zu bewahren las Chas v'Shalom l'dis Rashi. So that means, man sich noch a Pirush zu Zweiten zu bewahren as Chas v'Shalom l'dis Rashi. Now, Rashi does not introduce this, as we said, as that second explanation. Is understood that even the first interpretation calls to clarify that Chas v'Shalom Moshe Rabbeinu was not remiss. So now that Rebbe asks, "Hi, for Vosuk Rashi the Pshitus as this Atzel b'mitzvah is their far nenish geworden und bringt that feeling that zweiten Pirush was soll Shelo sein dem Ehe von Atzel bei Moshe." Why then does Rashi not say that in our pasuk? That why does Rashi say clearly that since Moshe Rabbeinu was lack in the performance of a mitzvah, he was punished? Why does Rashi not even give an additional interpretation that rejects the premise that Moshe was lax? In Parshas Shmos, he did it. When the Nefesh wanted to kill him, so there Rashi Tziddush Mikra brings one shot is that he was nisrashel in the mitzvah of Milah, and basically says Chas v'Shalom he was nisrashel. Over here, Rashi says b'pashtus. Not even trying to defend Moshe Rabbeinu. Why was Moshe kvedim? Is because b'shulshin is atzel b'mitzvah when the this Yaakov Lemov. Why isn't Rashi even trying to defend Moshe Rabbeinu like he did in the Shmais? Enough, even more so. I like in Ashton Pirush in Rashi, dort is the movement, even according to the first explanation, understood. Ibal is Moshe Yishin and the Shkivari. Other from this Shlashtas B'mitzvah, if Moshe Rabbeinu Parsha Shmais was punished because he was remiss, he was in this Rashel, and the mitzvah is the moving of Pasha. As from Dan on, is Moshe given Zar, as by ihm soll nicht sein Chas v'Shalom in from this Rashel B'mitzvah. So obviously Moshe will be very careful not to be remiss in the performance of mitzvahs. Right? V'yazeh is dar, Rashi for Arshas is given Moshe and Ini for this Atzah mitzvah. So how then does Rashi explain regarding Moshe that he was lax in the performance of mitzvahs? So two questions. Question number one is, in Parsha Shmos, we see Rashi brings an opinion by the whole Yavakish and Misibay, the Nakash, when Moshe Rabbeinu was going in, that Rashi brings an opinion that defends him, according to Pshudish Mikra. Yet, in the war of Amalek, if he did Moshe Kvedim, Rashi says, B'pashtus, Mishvil Shnis Atzel B'mitzvah. Why doesn't Rashi try to defend him? And if Moshe Rabbeinu was, according to the first opinion, was Nis Rashel, Nis Atzel, for saying Nis Rashel, that's the Lashon of Rashi, we're going to see later the difference between the two. Why doesn't, you don't think Moshe Rabbeinu learned this lesson and will not be lax or remiss about a mitzvah? Base. In Midrashim, it says, out of the time for us, Kov the Yadav. The Midrashim offer other reasons why his arms were very heavy, why they were weary. So it says like this: Aleph, in Tagim Yenis the state as das is the farvas and had upgelegt in Machawa if Mafra is that is BMO. Tagim Yenis, it says, it was because he delayed the war of Amalek until the next day, and that day did not act with alacrity. That's the first reason. Tagim Yenis says the reason why Moshe Rabbeinu was called the Yadav is because Hashem told him to go to war with Amalek, and he waited till the next day. Beis Nachat Tam state Yakru Yadav Shel Moshe Mishum Avnei Seim Shel Yisrael She'amra Yesh Hashem Mikrabbeinu. Others give a reason that Moshe's arm became weary because of the sins of the Jewish people who had questioned, is Hashem in our midst? So the Rebbe says like this: Das was Rashi bring nitim ersten tam akaponim al sheni. Why doesn't Rashi want to say that the Tagim son, because he was lax and pushing off the war to the next day, that's why his hands became heavy? The Rebbe says, "Val avol pias b'teishne." This is the time was Rashi zok b'berusha and he from hebech hazizus by Moshe. Even though that with the teichin, it's yes, showing how Moshe Rabbeinu was not have alacrity in the mitzvah. But the time is misnabed and Shuddush Mikra as that Atzis Hatzif the Nitkitan Bismacher. Now, it doesn't make sense to say that because of the consequence of Moshe's laxity, the battle was postponed until the next day. So he's over Nitvoven for Vosland Rashi Nitan Tam the player when the same shit Yisrael was like them. If Nitin Satzal Moshe, why couldn't Rashi bring the answer, like other Refarshim say, that because Moshe Rabbeinu's hand, because of the sins of the Jewish people, that's when Moshe's hands became weary. A situation already also described in Torah. And like this, Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't come out that he did anything wrong. Why doesn't Rashi bring this opinion? Befrat, as that is aber simply so nicht kein Kiddush. Das ist Hashem gesagt geworden für ihn Pirsch Rashi. As the ganze Sibu von Muhammad Malek is das, was the Yidden haben gesagt, Hashem Rabbeinu. As we know that that won't be a Kiddush. Rashi already mentioned that the battle of Amalek was entirely the result of the Jewish people's suffering as Hashem in our midst. Is the Mer Masim Tzelangak upon them als zweiten Pirush, as we dem Meshach Kvedem, is by the same Shad Yisrael, was again them, hat Shem detailed itself, to Meister sein, as das, so they were in here for this observation. So that it would be more appropriate for Rashi to have explained, at least as an alternative explanation, that Moshe's arms were weary because of the sins of the Jewish people, a situation already discussed by Torah, for attributing Moshe's weary arms to Moshe's lax attitude. So we said in Bezes, the Medrash says, in Midrash Chazal, you find his hands were covered either because he procrastinated the war and didn't do it right away, he waited till the next day, or because of an essentially stole. So mainly the Targum Yeni says, answer, it doesn't make sense that because of the Atzos Moshe, the war should be postponed for the next day. I don't really understand what they're ever saying here. But it doesn't, I guess that I was learning that just mitzad absolus, that the war should be postponed the next day. I guess that doesn't make sense for some reason. The main question is, if you say that it's mitzad Avnei Shel Yisrael, so that comes out that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't do anything. And we already know this in Torah, that because of the Avnei Shel Yisrael, we know this, so why not bring this answer? Gimel. Die Schwierigkeit in By Shalash Sedudas as Nisal zum Moshe Mitzvah Minir Achatachla read enough Gnesser. This idea that Moshe was lax in the performance of the mitzvah is a bigger problem. Parshas Pinchas, if them was Moshe at Gebedem beim Ebersten Yifken Hashem Isha La'eda Asher Yotze Lefneim Begamer. As an Ashmei Farsh, Likkutei Derech Mafia only Shieshim Bevatem Meshachal Eschai Leisim L'Mechama. Like Moshe Asisi Ani Shelachamtim B'Sichah. Parshas Pinchas, the pasuk relating how Moshe asks Hashem, may Hashem appoint a man over the assembly who shall go out before them. Rashi says, not in the matter of kings and other nations who sit in their homes and send their armies off to war, but like I did for the battle against Sichah and Leg. It says, as by Moshe's given klar as aish ala edadaf aleda riskin l'machama, which means that Moshe certainly knew that a man over the assembly must go out to war. Or nachmer Moshe brings out Beispieling them sein eigener Nagel bepel. And not only that, but Moshe gives himself as an example. Like myself, what I did in the battle against Sichah and Leg. Even though this was when he was 120 years old. Is doch der Moor beis, wie kommt es sein, der Ish alle Ede und mit der Rumfertiger Inger. And becomes a Malik is a Satz Moshe. So now the question is, how could it be that Moshe, as the man over the assembly, was approximately 40 years younger than during the war of Amalek, was lax? For them go for Mukhaf. As he von his Atzel by Mechamas Amalek is not stated that so was Isha Eda Darfalin gegen Bill Mechamas. Or Sudan was Moshe Allein Sichah Gefrip and Mechamas Sichah and So this demonstrates that Moshe's laxity during the war of Amalek did not conflict with the obligation as a man over the assembly to enter into a Muhammad with him, as he did with the war of Sichah and Leg. So obviously there's something going on by Muhammad Amalek which is different, that Moshe had an ideology, something different that he felt was needed. As you see that Moshe Rabbeinu himself, by Muhammad Sichah and Leg, he was 140 years older, and he went in with full force. It wasn't laxed at all. Dalit. Merkt man das verstehen, merkt man die Lashon von Nantirischer Ashi da. Whereas Meshana from Lashon was der sagt, wie Berushi Pasha Shreis. If you look in the difference between here and Muhammad Amalek and Pasha Shreis, you find a few different nuances. Number one, Dar Zok Rashi Shinistashel and Dash Shinisatzel. Over there, the Lashon was that Moshe was Nisrashel in the Mila of his son. Over here, actually says Nisatzel. So what's the difference between Ashlanis and Atzlanis? Number two, also, in Parsha Shemais, he says Shinis Lasho without specifying how. Here, actually says Shinis Atzel b'mitzvah. Moshe was lax in performance of mitzvah. So the Rebbe says the chilek between Ashlonis and Atzlanis is, what's the difference between Ashlonis and Atzlanis? Ashlonis made allgemeine Aufgelassenkeit, was is greater as Malek of zu ton epis was. Now, he says that Rashlonis connotes being generally like remiss, leading a person to procrastinate. Atzlanis is Foilikait, Benigea Apratis to Kripula, Ton, Gain, Aufstehen für Schlaf, Geht was a Vamila, Feld is Sadrusha. Atzlanis connotes laxity toward a specific action, doing, going, walking up from sleep, waking up from sleep, and so on, thereby acting without the necessary alacrity in that thing. So that's the difference between Ashlonis and Atzlanis. But indeed, the Dan Abris is by Moshe it given kin Atzlas tam chasvashol. In our case, Moshe did not exhibit an ordinary Atzlanis, that he was lazy. Nor is Atzel b'mitzvah, or rather, he was lax in the performance of the mitzvah. Concerning the particular mitzvah being discussed here. So this was regarded being lax, as we're going to explain. Okay, hey. The beer business, the explanation is like this. The Sibba was Moshe is not gegangen in the Mechama is, what's the reason why Moshe did not go into the war of Amalek? Is up to Pshut Shal Mikra. Is given an here from Ashlamis, other is not given an here from Ashlamis, other Fidel Axel Chasashal. God forbid to say that Moshe was procrastinating or he was lazy. Norval and out gehalten as is not massive Nishbein Shanat to sein Yetzetzava. Moshe Rabbeinu felt in the war of Amalek, since he's not eligible for military service, according to Torah, the military men were from the age of 20 to 60. Enough of a game, Benishon the Anshe Tzava, run for Muhammad is massive, Fardi was signing them Gil from Yetzetzava. Was up Torah is thus from Ben Esim, Ben Shishim. The role of being in the leading soldiers in the battle is suitable, as we said, for a more eligible age, according to Torah, is from 20 to 60. Und Alpha Benz mir gefällt, als Moshe Rabbeinu hat in jenem Mann durchgeführt die alle Isis und Moshe. Was Asaf und Zeh seine Gewinn verbunden mit Kechel wurde. Now, true at the same time, Moshe carried out all the signs and miracles, many of them which required strength and power. Noch mehr in der Mechama Messiach in der Eig ist Moshe allein gegangen Benedikt von der Anshe Tzava. Reis weisendig, wie angedeihten in Krishdashi, äußerwirrliche geworden. Und da ist eine Schengen nach Gil Korot zu mir Vesserschana. So, but they're getting Ganzen out of the matzah. Now, yes, you're right. In the battle against Sichah and Eig, he was nearly 120 years old. He himself led the soldiers and displayed an extraordinary strength, as Rashi says. Nonetheless, the fight with Amalek was entirely different. The Anhagel from Eberstein mit Yidin bis zu der Mechama mit Amalek is gewährt nicht al Pitava. The way that Hashem treated the Yidin till Mechama Amalek was mamish not according to the nature. Now, if in Nisi, everything was miraculous. First of all, look at the signs and the miracles that happened in Mitzrayim. It's Mitzrayim, Mitzrayim, for Shalach, or that often do this among us love. So everything that the Yidden had was miraculously brought down, like we know the wand and the quill to satiate the Jewish people. And come the governor feed them who Yidden haben gesagt, dass Hashem Rekabenu im Ayin ist der Eberstein Hagen mit den Jeden nicht gewähnt in dem Eifen von Nissim Leben. Aber Rashi sagt, mit Chilas Parshas Amalek, als Samach Parshas und Mikra zu Leimer, Leimer, Tamid an Ibn Nechem, Muzum Lakol Tzrak Se'em, Atam Ino, an Yesh Hashem Rekabenu, Chayechem Shakela Ba'chuli. And with the Lashon was Rashi 4 days, Ashlichem Olav. Now, once they arrived in Refidim, and they had the chutzpah to ask, is Hashem in our midst or not, Hashem's care for the Jewish people was no longer expressed by Hashem's performance with miracles, as Rashi says at the beginning, and he explains the narrative concerning Amalek. The Torah replaces the passage with the preceding pasuk, as to say, Hashem says, I am always amongst you. I am ready for all your needs, yet you say, is Hashem in our midst? I swear by your lives that the dog will come. And in the Rashi brings this parable that the father flung the child down, etc. Let's say the Sibba from Mechama Amalek is given the Hester Panu for the Eberstein, which means that the war of Amalek was a result of Hashem's concealing his countenance. Die Balas Yidden seinen Devil gewinnen am Matze, nicht wie früher noch von Hester Panu, und Heppe Hanagen, ihr Sister Ibra hat sich gefordert, als Besten gesagt, auf in Mechama geführt werden in der Seder von Mechama Tivis, als bei der Yetzitzava soll sein Buffer, fragt die Ende, By Shalash ist sein in dem Gila Gurm, wie wir es ad Shisha. Now, since the Jewish people were in a state, not like earlier, but rather with Hashem's countenance was concealed for them, it was a period with Hashem was not working with miracles, so the battle also had to be executed naturally. The best soldiers were to be selected, especially the ones leading the troops, and they had to be at the physical prime from 20 to 60. So that's what Moshe made us said, I'm not getting involved in this war because we're working with Teva. Teva, I'm 80 years old. I shouldn't be going to war. Sorry, it was the Mechamas given not Teva. It ever talked to Zabo for the Shemesha Altida, you see, keep Yad Khalasati, Seves, Kol Amai, Vesatsu, Sisidekasha, Sisidameli. However, by Sichah and Eig, it was conducted miraculously. Hashem said explicitly to Moshe, do not fear him, for into your hands I have given him, his entire people in the land, and you shall do to him as you did to Sichah and Eig. And Amachamas from the Satan is not neged darkei v'anogas hateva. So in a battle which I have given this teva, this operational consideration, organizational planning, were all irrelevant because everything was higher than teva. All right, we'll stop here. Yeah, have a good day.